3 children, one quiet family home, and a tragedy that left an entire nation asking the same impossible question. Did a loving mother suddenly become a killer, or was she suffering from a mental illness so severe that she no longer understood what she was doing? As the courtroom searches for answers, the Lindsay Clancy trial has become one of the most emotional and controversial cases in America. Before her name appeared in courtrooms and national headlines, Lindsay Clancy was known as a labor and delivery nurse, a wife, and the mother of 3 young children. She lived with her husband, Patrick Clancy, in the quiet town of Duxbury, Massachusetts. To neighbors and friends, they looked like an ordinary family building a happy life together. Photos shared online showed birthdays, family outings, and smiling children. From the outside, nothing seemed unusual. But on the evening of January 24, 2023, everything changed. According to investigators, Patrick briefly left the house to pick up takeout food and medicine after Lindsay asked him to run a few errands. When he returned, only a short time later, he discovered a horrifying scene inside the home. Emergency responders rushed to help the family's 3 children, but despite desperate efforts, the tragedy would leave all 3 of them dead. Lindsay herself was also found seriously injured after what authorities described as an apparent suicide attempt, and she was taken to a hospital for emergency treatment. The heartbreaking case immediately dominated national news. As investigators began piecing together what had happened, people across the country struggled to understand how such a devastating event could occur inside a family that had appeared so loving and stable. Then, another layer of the story emerged. Lindsay's attorney said she had been experiencing severe postpartum mental illness and argued that her condition had dramatically affected her state of mind. That single claim transformed the case into something much larger than a criminal investigation. It raised a question that continues to divide both the courtroom and the public. Was this an unimaginable act of violence, or the result of a profound mental illness that no one fully recognized until it was too late? As investigators worked to understand what had happened inside the Clancy home, the case quickly became one of the most closely watched criminal investigations in the country. Detectives interviewed witnesses, reviewed digital evidence, collected medical records, and carefully reconstructed the timeline leading up to the tragedy. Prosecutors ultimately charged Lindsay Clancy with multiple counts of murder and assault, arguing that the evidence showed deliberate actions for which she should be held criminally responsible. But almost immediately, the defense presented a very different picture. Lindsay's attorneys argued that this was not a case driven by anger or revenge. Instead, they claimed she had been suffering from an extreme form of postpartum mental illness that severely affected her ability to think clearly and understand reality. According to the defense, she had been under medical care, had been prescribed several psychiatric medications, and had repeatedly sought help for worsening mental health symptoms in the weeks before the tragedy. They argued that her condition, not criminal intent, was at the center of the case. Those competing narratives divided public opinion across the United States. Some people believed the evidence pointed to criminal responsibility and that justice demanded accountability. Others believed the case exposed the devastating consequences of severe postpartum psychiatric illness and raised difficult questions about whether the healthcare system had failed to recognize the warning signs. As expert evaluations, psychiatric records, and legal filings became central to the proceedings, it became clear that this trial would not focus on whether the tragedy occurred. Everyone agreed on those heartbreaking facts. The courtroom's most difficult question was why it happened, and whether Lindsay Clancy's mental state should change how the law judges one of the most heartbreaking family tragedies in recent American history. When the case reached the courtroom, the focus shifted away from the heartbreaking scene inside the Clancy home and toward a much more difficult question. What was happening inside Lindsay Clancy's mind? Unlike many murder trials, the central issue was not simply what happened that day, but whether Lindsay was legally responsible for her actions at the time. Prosecutors argued that the evidence showed planning and awareness, maintaining that Lindsay should be held accountable under Massachusetts law. They pointed to the timeline of events, witness statements, and other evidence they believe demonstrates criminal responsibility. Their position was clear. While the tragedy was heartbreaking, mental health struggles alone do not automatically remove legal responsibility for a person's actions. The defense, however, presented a dramatically different story. They called medical experts who described Lindsay's history of severe postpartum mental illness and explained how rare psychiatric conditions can affect perception, judgment, and a person's ability to distinguish reality. According to the defense, Lindsay had sought treatment, was under psychiatric care, and had been prescribed multiple medications before the tragedy. They argued that the jury needed to understand not just what happened, but the mental condition she was experiencing when it happened. As both sides finished presenting their arguments, the courtroom was left with one of the most challenging questions in criminal justice. Could a mother suffering from a profound psychiatric illness still be found fully criminally responsible? Or had her mind become so impaired that the law should view the tragedy differently? The answer to that question would not only determine Lindsay Clancy's future, it could influence how courts and society approach severe postpartum mental illness for years to come. As the legal battle continued, it became clear that the Lindsay Clancy trial was about far more than a single family's unimaginable loss. Every hearing, every expert opinion, and every court filing was closely watched because the case raised questions that reached far beyond one courtroom. At the time of this video, the criminal case is still moving through the legal process and no final verdict has been reached. That means the court has not yet determined whether Lindsay Clancy is legally responsible under Massachusetts law. The presumption of innocence remains in place until the case is fully resolved. While the legal proceedings continue, the case has already sparked a nationwide conversation about postpartum mental illness and the criminal justice system. Medical experts, lawyers, and families across the country have debated whether existing laws are equipped to deal with rare psychiatric conditions that can affect new mothers. Some believe the case highlights the urgent need for better mental health care and earlier intervention. Others argue that regardless of a person's mental condition, the justice system must still carefully examine accountability when innocent lives are lost. No matter where people stand, almost everyone agrees on one thing. This tragedy has changed countless lives forever. It has forced difficult conversations about mental health, family support, and the warning signs that may go unnoticed until it is too late. The Lindsay Clancy trial is still unfolding, and its final outcome could influence how future courts handle cases involving severe postpartum psychiatric illness. Whether the final decision is viewed as justice, compassion, or something in between, this case will likely remain one of the most significant and emotionally challenging criminal trials in recent American history.